Order. Order. I call the Secretary of State for Transport to make a statement.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement about bus services. Britain's often described as a railway nation, but if we have a national form of transport, public transport, it's definitely the bus, carrying over 4 billion passengers a year in England, more than twice as many as rail, over a vast network. No other type of public transport comes close for convenience, affordability and popularity. If anyone needs persuading of the bus's value, then surely the 2020 experience has provided us all the evidence we need. Without buses operating day and night, many key workers would have been unable to get to work. So we owe a debt of gratitude to the bus industry, and in particular the magnificent bus drivers for keeping this country moving. What COVID has shown is that buses provide Britain with far more than just a means of travel. They're a lifeline for millions. In normal times, they help students get to college, they help those without work attend job interviews, they help the elderly get to the shops, they help us all get about. They're crucial for the survival of our high streets, for rural businesses and for the planet too. And for many disabled people, they can be an accessible way to stay mobile. In all these ways, buses are not just an industry, but they're almost like a social service, and fundamentally they help us level up the country. But buses can and should also be the transport of choice, in my view. In London, in Brighton, in Harrogate, they've proved it. Frequent modern services, dedicated lanes, attracted millions of journeys a year from the private car. We want to do that everywhere, throughout the country, and yet in most regions outside of London, services have been in decline for decades. Successive governments before this one have failed to prioritise buses, either with sufficient investment or with a workable plan. And that's why this government is taking action to revitalise bus services, and why today we published the National Bus Strategy for England outside of London, with a very bold vision for the industry to reform the way that it's managed, to deliver tangible benefits for passengers, and all backed by £3 billion of government investment. Madam Deputy Speaker, COVID has hit the bus sector hard, as it has all transport, but it's also provided an opportunity to put better bus services at the heart of the community. Throughout 2020, bus companies and councils have had to cooperate like never before to keep services running for key workers. Now we want to harness that same sense of partnership and change the way the industry fundamentally works by putting the passenger and the environment first. Passengers want simpler fares, more routes, services, easier information, greener buses. And this bus strategy reflects people's lives. In cities and towns, that means travelling when we want and where we want becomes easy to do on a bus. We expect councils and operators to bring in simple, cheap, flat fares with contactless payment by card or by phone. Up-to-date information which should be available immediately on our phones, on board the buses, at the bus stops themselves, and we want closer integration of services and ticketing across all forms of public transport, so people can seamlessly travel from buses to trams to trains. So we'll end the absurdity of a situation where different operators just don't recognise or accept each other's tickets. And we want to have much more of the turn up and go type of service, the kind of frequency that means you don't even have to look at the timetable before you get on the bus. More services in the evening and at the weekends, and in rural areas and out-of-town business parks. We need to be able to provide those buses, sometimes available on demand from an app on your phone. So today, I'm pleased to announce £20 million investment from our Rural Mobility Fund to trial on-demand services in 17 different locations, including minibuses booked via an app that people pick near their homes at a time which is convenient to themselves. But Madam Deputy Speaker, I want anyone who happens to be disabled to be able to confidently travel when and where they want. So this bus strategy will make sure all local services have audible and visible next stop announcements, and will consult this year on improving access to wheelchair space and priority seating for those who rely on them. A new bus passenger charter, or a series of them, will define precisely what all bus users can expect in their particular areas. And Madam Deputy Speaker, before COVID, the way that buses were organised made it hard to arrest the decline that, by the way, has been going on since the 1960s in bus ridership. Now the pandemic has brought councils and the industry together, and we want to work with every local transport authority in the country and their bus operators to be in statutory enhanced partnerships or in franchising arrangements throughout. The franchising system is used in London, for example, and Transport for London sets the routes and they set the fares. But that's not going to be appropriate everywhere, and that's why enhanced partnerships will be required, where the operators and the councils reach negotiated agreements on how buses will run, with local authorities taking greater responsibility for bus services, whichever solution they choose. So, by the 30th of June this year, we want all local authorities to commit to one of those two options, with the bus operator's support. We'll need that commitment if they are to receive further emergency funding from the COVID Bus Services Support Grant, so I can confidently predict that they will all be on board. Local authorities, in collaborations with operators, will then produce bus service improvement plans by the end of October this year. And these plans are pretty ambitious. By looking at the best bus services around the world and striving to match them, we expect to see how bus priority can best work without increasing congestion. We want to create plans for fares and ticketing, and we want to see how they'll deliver urban, town and rural users to their bus network. And future government financial support will depend on local authorities and operators coming together under an enhanced partnership or franchising agreement. For our part, we'll work with the councils to introduce bus priority schemes this year, and we'll roll out marketing to attract millions of new passengers to the network, people who've never used buses before. Madam Deputy Speaker, the strategy also sets out our roadmap to a zero-emission bus fleet. Bus operators have already invested £1.3 billion in greener buses over the last 5 years, and it's been supported by £89 million of government investment. But we're going to commit to delivering 4,000 zero-emission buses, and I expect to release funding for the first all-electric bus city very soon. However, only 2% of England's bus fleet is fully zero-emission today. So, after our historic move to end the sale of petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030, this bus strategy sets out our plans to end the sale of new diesel buses in England too. And today we've launched a consultation to decide how and when that will happen. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's strategy marks a new beginning for buses. We won't just stop the decline, which has been going on historically for decade after decade. We want to reverse it by making buses a natural choice for everyone, not just for those without any other travel options. And we want to put the passenger first. We want to build those stronger road partnerships I've been talking about by channeling £3 billion into better services. This is a sum that's never been seen before in bus investment, and it will help us to transform buses across England, and by doing so, to transform our country too. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, Jim McMahon, who has 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Transport Secretary for advance sight of his statement today? Can I also thank those in the bus and local public transport industries for the work that they've done over the course of a very difficult year to make sure that our country can keep on moving. Madam Deputy Speaker, this strategy should have been used to revolutionise the bus industry, but I'm afraid it lacks ambition, and it doesn't even touch the sides of the cuts and rocketing prices witnessed over the last decade by passengers. It should have been used to ensure that funds were properly directed to deliver a radical transition to a zero-emission fleet, something the Prime Minister promised now over a year ago. And it should have been used to create new green jobs in the bus and coach sector to give operators and manufacturers the boost they so badly need. But let's look beyond the headlines. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Transport Secretary says he wants buses to become more frequent, cleaner and greener. So firstly, more frequent. The reality is this government that has overseen the loss of 134 million miles of bus routes over the last decade. 3,000 local authority-supported bus services has been cut over the same period. And in every year since 2010, year on year, passenger journeys outside of London have fallen. It's his government that have made bus journeys less frequent in the first place. So can I ask, how specifically will he ensure that these aren't just a few more services to those routes that are already very well serviced, but actually a reversal of the 3,000 bus cuts that we've seen over the last decade? And how many of the 134 million bus miles lost will be returned by this investment? The second test, for it to be cheaper. The Office for National Statistics have reported that in January, bus inflation was up by 21% on the previous year. And so while a price cap is welcome, the cost of transport is already forcing people off buses. So what will he do to make sure not just that fares won't rise disproportionately in the future, but they'll actually be brought down to a reasonable level that people can afford and they'll choose to travel by bus? And the final test, for transport to be greener. It's over a year since the government promised 4,000 zero-emission buses, but the government hasn't even started yet. But even with that, it's nowhere near ambitious enough when we consider there are 32,000 buses in England alone. Even with a one-to-one replacement, that could leave over 28,000 buses which are not zero-emission. Many of which, incidentally, will be serving areas that are being considered for clean air zones because of the deadly level of pollution in those areas. It's been a year since we were promised a transport revolution and a year of re-announcements. While the pandemic can be held to blame for some of the passenger fall in numbers that we have seen, the Transport Secretary knows full well that the last decade has really weakened the foundations of bus services in this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, I turn to another announcement, council and operator partnerships. Councils across the country face a budget black hole of £15 billion, and this announcement that throws even more responsibility without the funding in place could weaken it even further. Like many, I back London franchise-style powers being extended across the country, and I sincerely hope that once this announcement is put into practice, that will be the reality for passengers across the country. I also support that councils will want to do it themselves, which is why we back municipal bus companies being established, something incidentally outlawed by this government in 2017. The government has indicated that that may well be revisited, but my question to the Transport Secretary is, why wait? Madam Deputy Speaker, it's clear that we drastically need a bus service that's fit for the future. Yet until we see those measures on the ground, we cannot even begin to claim to be ambitious, to have a green bus strategy that meets the demands of local people, that meets the demands of the immediate post-pandemic needs of the industry, and addresses the huge challenge of stopping climate change and meeting our objectives. The real legacy of this government is laid bare for all to see. The loss of key routes, rocketing ticket prices, and just 2% of the bus fleet zero emission. And it's on that record the government will be judged.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, predictably, the Honourable Gentleman is not entirely satisfied, and he says that the investment should have been bigger, and he says that we should have been investing more in zero carbon, and he criticised many other aspects. In fact, he didn't even need to wait for the bus strategy because he issued his press release to tell us all of this ahead of time, before the strategy was even out and before he could possibly have known what was in it. So I hope that he has now had the opportunity to read it, and if he has, he will have seen that this is an extremely ambitious plan, the most ambitious plan to change our buses of any government, right the way back to the 1980s, and it's not as if 1980s was the start of time and decline. I think I'm right in saying that from the 60s onwards we saw declines in bus ridership down from about 15.5 billion down to 5.5 billion. And we know that people had, in that period of time, switched to cars. And that's why this bus strategy is so ambitious about not trying to hold back any punches and saying we need to realign the way that we operate. We need to ensure that buses are more convenient and then therefore more reliable. And when they are, people are much more likely to take them. It is a formula, as he rightly says, that has operated very well in London under successive mayors, but I must say expanded under the previous one, to ensure that buses are clean, reliable. You don't even need a timetable, and that's what we want to get to when he asks about the reliability, the regularity of services. And we wouldn't be putting £3 billion in if we didn't expect, as the bus strategy says, to make them more affordable as well. It is central to our vision that they're not just practical, but they are the affordable means of transport. And lastly, I hear what he says about greening up the bus network. I'm as enthusiastic as him. He knows I am. I drive an electric car. I want to see our transport system decarbonised. When it comes to those buses, he mentions that we've previously announced our ambition to have 4,000 electric buses a year ago. He's absolutely right. That's what we wrote in our manifesto. And as he would expect, we are delivering on that. Today, this £120 million, which is mentioned in the bus strategy, goes towards the first 800 of those buses. It comes on top of money which has already been invested by the industry into creating more electric buses, and we're starting to see those on the road, including, I think I'm right in saying, a couple of thousand in London as well as elsewhere in the country. So it's starting to happen, and we are going to make sure that we meet that manifesto commitment of delivering 4,000 of them by the end of this Parliament. Finally, he mentions municipal bus services. I have to tell him, I'm not living in some world where I think there is only one way to do this. That's why we're talking about bus franchising, but we're also talking about enhanced partnerships. So we'll be interested to know that in my area, the service, though not a municipal bus operation, is actually run by the local university, the University of Hertfordshire, who own a bus company called Uno. Those are all the sort of creative ideas that we want to see developed by this national bus strategy. And his local authority and every other local authority and all the members in this House will have the opportunity to make sure that their local area are able to deliver against this bus strategy to improve those services in a way that he would approve for everybody.
We now go to the Chair of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I warmly welcome the buses strategy and thank the Secretary of State and also the Buses Minister, Baroness Spear, for taking ideas in. Secretary of State's right to look at best practice from local authorities. Brighton, he mentioned. What can we do, Secretary of State, to ensure that best practice becomes normal practice? And what more investment can be given to local authorities to make sure that there is a buses champion in each local transport authority?
Well, I want to warmly welcome my honourable friend's contribution to this debate, because it hasn't, not just in this chamber, the point he just made, but actually also as a select committee pushing for a bus strategy that we're proud to deliver today. He asked specifically about how he can help shape that, and local authorities. We are giving £25 million to local authorities to come up with this plan by October the 31st this year, and we expect every single local authority in the country to be part of that. And not only that, we want members in this House to work with their local authorities, a bit as I've done with the beaching reversal plan, which has been very popular, where MPs have helped to lead that, and I'd expect my honourable friend will want to do that in his area as well.
We now go to the SNP spokesperson, Gavin Newlands, who is participating virtually and who has 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for prior sight of the statement and by welcoming both the tacit admission that decades of bus deregulation has failed and the long-awaited publication of the National Bus Strategy for England, which the Prime Minister has billed a revolution. The only problem being, Madam Deputy Speaker, revolutions are usually fairly quick affairs. We've been waiting a year for this strategy, and it might be another year for the various consultations to run their course. Bus services are, of course, devolved, but as I've said in this place many times, the bus manufacturing sector is on its knees. Hundreds of jobs have already gone. We are lucky to have 3 world-class bus manufacturing companies in Switch, Wrightbus, and in particular Alexander Dennis. but we've yet to see a penny of the £3 billion committed last spring. In the last 12 months, almost no zero-emission buses have been delivered outside London or Scotland. In fact, very shortly, there will be more zero-emission buses in the town of Kilmarnock than there will be anywhere outside of London. The Scottish Government have got on with the job with its Scottish ultra-low emission bus schemes, which are extremely popular with both operators and manufacturers. With these schemes having shown just how quickly domestic demand for new, green, British-built vehicles can be stimulated in the circa 6-month lead time for manufacturing, how will the Government ensure that its commitment to 4,000 green buses actually results in new vehicles being delivered this calendar year, not next year or the year after, this year? And the Prime Minister spoke of getting young people onto buses, an aspiration shared by the Scottish Government, who have just committed to providing free bus transport to all under 22s as part of a plan to encourage lifelong public transport habits. Action, not words. Will the Minister commit to a similar policy in England? And Scotland has led the way in transport decarbonisation in the UK, but we must do more. So can he confirm that 100% of the funding provided for this strategy will be balanced, and can he put a precise figure and timescale on it?
Secretary of State.
Thank you. Well, look, I welcome what I think was a warm welcome to the idea of the English bus strategy. And with all these things, I like to work in cooperation and make it work for the whole of the United Kingdom. That's why, for example, Deputy Madam Speaker, I put money into dust carts in Glasgow, which are hydrogen run, and I think there are a dozen of them doing fantastic work and helping to develop the hydrogen economy. It's not quite as straightforward as the Honourable Gentleman makes out. We all know that you can produce a hydrogen vehicle. You've also got to produce the hydrogen in a green enough way that that is in itself not a polluting activity, and there's a whole supply line required for that, which is why in England I've assigned Teesside as the first hydrogen hub in the country in order to help bring all of those technologies together for all different forms of transport. But I wanted to answer one question directly. The Barnett formula is attached to this, and the monies will flow from that in the normal way.
We now go to Imran Ahmed Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the Government's ambitious new bus strategy, which will be critical in improving West Yorkshire's connectivity. A key issue facing Wakefield is the lack of a unified bus franchise. The main bus services to Huddersfield are run by Yorkshire Tiger, a different franchise to Arriva Metro, the main operator in Wakefield, meaning that tickets are not transferable. I know this is something our fantastic West Yorkshire mayoral candidate, Matt Robinson, is championing. Can my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, outline what steps will be taken to unify these bus franchises and provide West Yorkshire with an integrated London-style bus system?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, my honourable friend's absolutely right, as is Matt Robinson. What people want is to be able to jump on a bus and jump off another one and get on the third one, regardless of which company happens to be running them. And by the way, actually integrated with the rail services and where there are trams as well. So that is very much at the heart of our plan. My honourable friend will be pleased to learn that the bus strategy today requires and insists that the local authorities come up with a plan which has that ability to allow people to buy a ticket, use it many times, and indeed even use it in a capped fashion so they're not overcharged for many journeys.
Now go to Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like other members in the House, I welcome the release of Bus Back Better today and many of the provisions contained within it. But I wonder why the Secretary of State only commits to review of that part of the Bus Services Act 2017 that prohibits local authority ownership when the strategy highlights so many good examples, great examples of good practice. Why could he not go further and scrap those provisions?
State.
I certainly welcome the Honourable Lady welcoming this strategy today. And she mentions the Bus Services Act 2017, the extent to which local authorities, we already had an exchange on this, can run back bus services. She should know that I don't really mind who runs these services. I just want them to run properly. I want the passengers to be able to get a bus when they need them, where they need them, and as efficiently as possible. And so I will look at all of these matters in the context of what delivers the best services and nothing else.
Number 6 is withdrawn, so we go to Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As chair of the all-party motor group, which includes responsibility for all vehicle manufacturers, I'm concerned by the UK bus and coach industry, including companies such as Alexander Dennis and Wrightbus, a sector which has seen a loss of 1,000 jobs in this past year. My question really to the Secretary of State is why has it taken so long to introduce these proposals, this plan, given that it's almost 4 years ago I drove an electric bus here in Warwick and Leamington, the headquarters of Volvo Bus and Coach. The product was there that 4 years ago. Why have they not been adopted earlier?
Like the Honourable Gentleman, I'm a keen follower of electric technology, particularly in the heavier vehicles. And whilst electric cars have proven themselves, and we're seeing a large number on the road, in the bigger vehicles, there are still issues of weight of battery versus range and therefore availability. So some of those things are just the technological side of things that need resolving. But this is a lot of money being invested in zero carbon buses, and we're not saying they have to be electric or hydrogen. And it'd be, I think, very pleased to hear the zero carbon city announcements I'll be making shortly.
We now go to Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the bus strategy statement today, which will make a huge difference to rural communities such as Penrith and the Border. Rural buses are a lifeline to many as they are so important for connecting communities in our large geographical area. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it is essential that Cumbria County Council makes full use of these government funds, and they should work together with bus operators to make more routes viable, improve our local services, and therefore assist in the fight against rural isolation?
Secretary of State.
Honourable friend's absolutely right about that, and he'll be interested to hear that part of the strategy today is £20 million for rural bus services to try out different approaches. And I'm pleased to say that out of the 17 local authorities who are being provided with some of that money, Cumbria County Council are due to get £1.5 million, and I hope that he'll work with them to deliver better services for all his constituents.
Lloyd Russell Moyle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Look, I welcome any strategy that will continue to support buses, and I welcome that he's mentioned Brighton a number of times, where we have the Brighton Hove bus service, which might be in private hands, but still runs as if it was a municipal bus service with those ethoses. And we would love to have a hydrogen hub in our area, in either the port of Newhaven or Shoreham. I wonder if the Secretary of State, however, could give me reassurances about cross-border services and make sure there is a duty for the authorities to cooperate to ensure pricing does not jump about and you can have through pricing between authorities.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's actually an excellent point. I'm very, very keen that just because you cross over some usually totally invisible line between one local authority and the other, the service doesn't stop, your ticket doesn't run out, you can't then... So he's absolutely right, and I will be paying special attention to that as we see the way that the various different plans from the local authorities come in October.
We now go to James Daly.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome my Right Honourable Friend's announcement? Earlier in this Parliament, working with my Right Honourable Friend, the Prime Minister and other Conservative colleagues, we secured funding to save the X41 bus service running between Ramsbottom and central Manchester. Will my Right Honourable Friend confirm that Bury Council, TFGM and bus operators will have access to further monies and support under this strategy, ensuring everyone in Bury, Ramsbottom and Tottington have access to high-class bus services together with an increased number of routes?
State.
Well, I can certainly confirm that this bus strategy is very much in line with the type of thing that he wants to see happen with the X41 bus and his, I imagine, his residents in Ramsbottom and elsewhere. Very, very important that we join all this back together, that people can reliably get these buses in the evening, back out of towns and cities to the more outlying areas. I don't think he'll be disappointed by what he reads today.
We now go to Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome many aspects of this statement today and say to the Secretary of State he's effectively delivered the obituary for the failed deregulation of bus services outside London. So there's going to be a local choice between enhanced partnerships and franchising. Could the Secretary of State look at trying to remove some of the time-consuming barriers to getting towards franchising, which local transport authorities have to go through? And finally, when it comes to reforming the grant system, will he ensure that the money is actually paid to the local transport authorities so it can be spent in line with local priorities?
And Deputy Speaker, taking that in reverse order, he's absolutely right, of course, that there are times where it would make a lot more sense for the money to go to the local authorities. However, for the sake of speed during this crisis, I haven't wanted to add further complications, as the bus support grant has been literally a lifeline to various areas. This strategy will enable more work on the suggestions that he's making. Also, with regard to franchising, and on his first point, we can talk about what happened in 1986, is it 37 years ago now, or we can talk about the future. And this bus strategy and I want to talk about the future.
We now go to Simon Jupp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly welcome the steps outlined in the bus strategy to help operators and local authorities deliver frequent, more reliable, easier to use services. More comprehensive bus services will be needed, especially in rural areas like East Devon, to protect both socially necessary and economically necessary routes and services. What plans does my right honourable friend have to help people get the bus to work any time of day?
My honourable friend's right to point out that, particularly in rural areas, East Devon, many other parts of the country, often the social value of a route is, I think, missed by the current formulas that are in place. And that's one of the reasons why we've, with this bus strategy today, launched this fund, £20 million, to develop rural services that work better. Some of that, a lot of it, is just about making sure the service is more regular, and it's funded, even at times when it requires public support to be funded and to have that certainty. But there are other innovative ideas, including, for example, having buses which are available on demand. And people are used to using an app to call a taxi. Why shouldn't you be able to do that, to have a bus route via you in order to get to where you're going? So lots of very innovative ideas which will be very applicable in rural areas as well.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Member of Parliament for the Wright Bus Factory in my constituency, which has carried out pioneering work, indeed, we're the first to produce the hydrogen bus for the UK, and indeed the battery diesel bus. I have been pushing the Prime Minister for some time in this, and I welcome the statement today and the plan to drive forward plans to buy British-made buses. But there are many shovel-ready projects available for zero-emission buses across the UK. And the current plans will mean that it will not be until 2022 before this plan starts to roll out. So I ask the Secretary of State, why the wait? What are we waiting for? Why can't we get on with it? And I hope that he will tell his officials after today's statement that he gives them a mission, and that their mission is to go out, get this money out the door, get it into shovel-ready projects to buy British buses without any further delay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, look, I share his impatience, but the money is this year. So that £120 million for those zero-carbon buses is to be spent for this year, for introduction of those first buses. So I don't recognise any particular reason to delay. We're in touch with all of the bus manufacturers, and we wish them well in their progress.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the National Bus Strategy today as part of another key spoke of the Levelling Up agenda alongside lifelong learning, the Levelling Up Fund and transport more generally. This is really about delivery, not dogma, and I'm particularly glad to see those options available for local authorities, and particularly also the integrated and social nature of some of the funding available. Can he assure me that he'll look at services in places in my constituency like Burnhope and Weardale, who really need those extra bus services later in the evenings for some potential pilot schemes?
I think one of the biggest points about buses is that you want to be able to get them in the evening, at the weekend. They shouldn't just stop because you've gone, somewhere to meet with somebody. Those days will come again, and then not be able to get a bus home. That's exactly when you need them to run. So I think for his constituents in Burnhope and Weardale, well, there is new hope today in this bus strategy.
Deputy Speaker, spending on bus services in London is £60 higher per person than in South Yorkshire, and we've seen funding fall by 40% over the last decade. So any strategy is welcome, but what we really need is investment. So can I ask the Minister what funding our region can expect and by when?
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right. I mean, this is almost the fundamental point of this strategy, which was we recognise that London gets fantastic bus services, and we want the rest of the country to get some of it as well. The share is of £3 billion. I can't give her the precise figures today, but I look forward to her local authority doing the work and coming back to me, and by October we should have numbers to talk about.
We now go to Catherine Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm personally hugely excited about the opportunities that today's announcement brings. However, when I've been sharing previous initiatives from the Department of Transport, the comments page underneath has said something along the lines of, well, I'd settle for a bus from Hesketh Bank to Tarleton. Can the Secretary of State give me and the people of South Ribble that the confidence that communities, businesses, educational establishments, industry will be able to input their needs to transform Lancashire's bus services?
Yes, Deputy Madam Speaker, that's absolutely right. And I'll tell you how I want this to work. I want members in this House to have a real input into it. So as the plan is being developed by their local authority, MPs should be on their shoulders, looking over, making sure that the new business park is included, or indeed anybody who lives in Hesketh Bank and Tarleton, to make sure that they get their services as well. So it will be up for local members to make sure that happens.
We now go to Emma Lewell-Buck.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The North East has suffered underinvestment in transport for too long. In 2019, it was revealed that over £3,600 of spend was planned per head for London and just over £500 per head for the North East. The Prime Minister said this strategy was an act of levelling up. We know this phrase is a smokescreen for gifting money to areas that don't need it but happen to have a Tory MP. So can the Secretary of State tell us what criteria will be applied to ensure this £3 billion is shared fairly amongst our regions?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, I agree, and I just said London has been getting a very nice bite of the cherry with its buses, and we want the rest of the country to get the same. That's the point of launching this. But I'm afraid I don't recognise the second point she made, and she may be getting confused with the fact that hard-working, great MPs who lobby for their local areas may just end up being successful in bringing services to their area. I've no doubt she will join her area to that list as well.
Number 18 is withdrawn, so we go to Kevan Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many rural communities rely on bus services provided by small, often family-run businesses, like, for example, Stanley Travel in my North Durham constituency. Now, they've found it very hard during COVID because they haven't got the resource to capital that some of the larger companies have. So what civic help is going to be available to those type of companies to ensure that not only they survive, but also that those important local bus services continue?
Secretary of State.
Well, the honourable gentleman's absolutely right. I mean, in terms of the smaller companies, as ever with this coronavirus, they have certainly had a very tough time. It's worth mentioning we put £240 million and then £27 million per week into supporting buses. So it's not that we haven't been pumping a lot of money in without which those services wouldn't be able to survive at all. And of course, individual smaller companies will have had access to things like furlough. But this strategy overall is their sort of sunlight at the end of this, because for the first time there'll be a proper strategy that he and his local authority will be able to oversee, and I'm sure there'll be great opportunities for some of the smaller bus companies as well.
Final question is to James Wild.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Buses provide a lifeline for people in North West Norfolk, but rural areas have seen higher reductions in services. So will my right honourable friend ensure that Norfolk gets a fair share of this welcome new funding, not only to rebuild, but to enhance services with later buses and new links, as well as capital for improvements to speed up journeys alongside the coast?
Well, yes, I will, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've no doubt that he will fight for his constituents and his area, and by hooking up with the local authority and working with them, we'll have a very good look at the investment strategy that they put together to make sure that he enjoys much better services in the future than his constituents have in the past.
I thank the Secretary of State for his statement, and we'll have a short 3-minute suspension to make arrangements for next business.